The February rain hammered against the kitchen windows of the Donovan mansion like thousands of tiny fingers begging to be let in. Mia pressed her worn hands against the marble countertop, feeling the cold seep through her fingertips as she scrubbed away the remnants of another lavish dinner party she hadn't been invited to enjoy. It was nearly 9 p.m., and the mansion stood eerily quiet now that the guests had left. Mrs. Donovan had retired to her bedroom with a headache and a glass of wine. Mr. Donovan was somewhere in his study, probably on another conference call that would stretch past midnight. The couple barely acknowledged Mia's existence most days, except to leave notes about cleaning schedules or complaints about dust on the chandelier. She had worked for the Donovans for 3 years now, 3 years of invisible labor, of perfecting the art of being present but unseen, useful but unheard. At 42, Mia had learned that survival meant silence. It meant accepting the $500 a week that barely covered her rent in a cramped studio apartment 15 miles away. It meant swallowing her pride when Mrs. Donovan spoke to her like she was furniture that occasionally malfunctioned. But tonight felt different somehow. The storm outside matched the restlessness in her chest. Mia wiped down the last plate and was about to turn off the kitchen lights when she heard it. A soft, almost imperceptible knock at the service entrance. Not the front door where guests arrived, not the main entrance where deliveries came, but the small door near the kitchen that led to the garden and the service alley beyond. She froze. Nobody used that door. Nobody even knew about it except the staff, and the other maid had quit 2 weeks ago, leaving Mia to manage the enormous house alone. The knock came again, lighter this time, hesitant. Mia's heart hammered as she approached the door. She thought about ignoring it, about pretending she hadn't heard anything. The Donovans had strict rules about strangers, about letting anyone into the house without permission. She could lose her job. She could lose everything. But something made her reach for the handle. When she opened the door, the cold February air rushed in, and with it came the most unexpected sight. A small boy, no older than 7 or 8, stood shivering in the doorway. He was soaking wet, his clothes clinging to his thin frame. His feet were bare, cut and dirty. In his trembling hands, he clutched an empty paper bag. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The boy's eyes were huge and dark, filled with something Mia recognized instantly, fear mixed with desperate hope. His lips were tinged blue from the cold, and his teeth chattered so violently he could barely form words. I'm sorry to bother you," he whispered, his voice surprisingly polite despite his obvious distress. "I'm very hungry. Do you have any food you could spare? Just anything, please." Mia's maternal instincts, dormant for years since her own son had grown up and moved away, surged to life. She didn't think about the rules. She didn't think about the consequences. She only saw a child in need. "Oh my God, sweetheart, come in right now," she said, pulling the door wider. "You're freezing." The boy hesitated at the threshold, as if he couldn't quite believe she was inviting him inside. "Are you sure? I don't want to cause trouble, I haven't eaten since yesterday morning and I saw the light and I thought maybe." "Stop talking and get in here before you catch pneumonia," Mia insisted, reaching out to gently guide him inside. The moment her hand touched his shoulder, she felt how cold he was. Ice cold, as if he'd been wandering in the rain for hours. Once inside, the boy stood awkwardly on the kitchen floor, dripping water onto the pristine tiles Mia had just mopped. He looked around with wide eyes, taking in the restaurant-grade appliances, the crystal chandeliers visible through the doorway, the obvious wealth that saturated every corner of the house. "I'll get you some towels," Mia said quickly. "And food. Lots of food. You just stay right here, okay? Don't move." "Okay," he whispered. "Thank you. Thank you so much." Something about the way he spoke struck Mia as unusual. His grammar was impeccable. His manners were refined. This wasn't a street kid, she realized. This was a child who had been taught how to behave, how to speak, how to express gratitude properly. But then why was he here, alone and desperate, looking like he'd been surviving on nothing? She hurried to the laundry room and grabbed several clean towels, then rushed back to find him still standing in the exact same spot, shivering but obedient. She wrapped the towels around his small body, rubbing his arms gently to generate warmth. "What's your name, honey?" she asked softly. He looked up at her with those impossibly dark eyes, and for just a second, she thought she saw him calculating whether to tell the truth. Then he said, "Oliver." "Oliver," Mia repeated, kneeling down to his level. "I'm Mia, and you're safe here, okay? I'm going to make you something warm to eat. Do you like soup?" His eyes lit up like she'd just offered him a treasure chest of gold. Yes, I love soup. Any soup. Anything at all. Mia stood and moved quickly to the refrigerator, pulling out leftover chicken from the dinner party, fresh vegetables and homemade broth she'd prepared earlier that week. Within minutes, she had a pot heating on the stove, filling the kitchen with a rich, comforting aroma. Oliver watched her every movement with an intensity that was almost unnerving. He'd stopped shivering quite so violently, but his small hands still clutched the towel around his shoulders like a lifeline. "How long have you been out there?" Mia asked as she chopped vegetables. 2 days, he said quietly. "Maybe 3. I lost track." Mia's knife paused mid-chop. 3 days? "Oliver, where are your parents?" His expression shuddered immediately and he looked down at his feet. I can't tell you. I'm sorry. I just can't." Red flags went up in Mia's mind. This wasn't a simple case of a lost child. Something was very wrong. But pushing him wouldn't help. She could see the trauma written in the tension of his small shoulders, in the way his eyes darted toward the door periodically, as if expecting someone to burst through at any moment. "That's okay," she said gently. "You don't have to tell me anything you're not ready to share. But Oliver, after you eat, we might need to call someone. The police or—" "No!" His voice cracked with sudden panic. "Please, no police, please. I just need to rest and then I'll go. I promise I'll leave. Just, please don't call anyone." The terror in his voice made Mia's heart break. She set down the knife and walked over to him, crouching down again to meet his eyes. "Sweetheart, I'm not going to do anything that makes you feel unsafe, but I need you to understand that there are probably people very worried about you right now." Oliver's lower lip trembled, and for the first time, she saw tears gathering in his eyes. "Nobody's worried about me," he whispered. "Nobody even notices when I'm gone." Before Mia could respond to that heartbreaking statement, the soup began to bubble on the stove. She quickly returned to it, stirring and adjusting the heat, then ladled a generous portion into a bowl. She added a thick slice of homemade bread and placed it all on the kitchen table. "Come sit," she said. "Eat slowly, okay? Your stomach's probably not used to much food right now." Oliver approached the table like it might disappear if he moved too quickly. He climbed onto the chair, too big for him, his feet dangling far above the floor, and stared at the soup for a long moment before picking up the spoon with shaking hands. The first bite made him close his eyes. A small sound escaped his throat, something between relief and grief. Mia sat across from him watching as he ate with the desperate hunger of someone who truly hadn't known when their next meal would come. She wanted to ask more questions, wanted to understand how a child like this ended up alone and starving. But she held back, giving him space to feel safe. After several minutes of silence broken only by the sound of the spoon against the bowl, Oliver looked up at her. His eyes were clearer now, more focused. The color was returning to his cheeks. "You're very kind," he said softly. "Not everyone would do this. Most people just walk by, or they get scared and tell me to leave." "Well, I'm not most people," Mia said with a sad smile, "and no child should ever be turned away when they're hungry." Oliver took another bite, then set down his spoon. He looked at her with an expression far too mature for his age. "I'll make you rich someday," he said suddenly, his voice carrying a strange certainty. "I promise. When I'm older, when I can, I'll make sure you never have to worry about anything again." Mia felt her throat tighten with emotion. She tried to smile, tried to treat it as the sweet fantasy of a child's gratitude. "That's very sweet, Oliver, but you don't owe me anything. I'm just giving you a meal." "It's more than a meal," he insisted, his small hand reaching across the table to touch hers. "You're treating me like I matter, like I'm a real person. You have no idea how rare that is." Something about those words struck Mia as deeply wrong. Not the sentiment itself, but the fact that a child this young could articulate such a painful truth. What kind of life had he been living that basic human kindness felt revolutionary? Before she could respond, they both heard it. Footsteps upstairs. Heavy, deliberate footsteps moving toward the main staircase. Oliver's entire body went rigid. The spoon clattered against the bowl. "It's okay," Mia whispered quickly. "That's just Mr. Donovan. He probably won't even come to the kitchen. Just stay quiet." But Oliver's face had gone pale, and his eyes were wide with something that looked like recognition. "Donovan?" he whispered. "This is the Donovan house?" "Yes," Mia said, confused by his reaction. "Do you know them?" Before Oliver could answer, the footsteps stopped at the top of the stairs and Mr. Donovan's voice echoed through the house. "Mia, are you still here? I need you to prepare something. I'll be working late." Mia's pulse quickened. She looked at Oliver, whose entire face had transformed into a mask of confusion and something else, something that looked almost like hope mixed with dread. "Stay here," she whispered to him. "Don't move. Don't make a sound." She stood and walked toward the kitchen doorway, her heart pounding. If Mr. Donovan found out she'd let a strange child into the house, she'd be fired on the spot. But as she stepped into the hallway, something made her glance back. Oliver was staring at the doorway where Mr. Donovan's voice had come from, and on his young face was an expression that would haunt Mia for days to come. The look of a child who had just realized he might have accidentally stumbled into the one place that could either save him or destroy him completely. Mia's hands trembled slightly as she stepped into the hallway, pulling the kitchen door partially closed behind her. Through the gap, she could still see Oliver frozen at the table, his small frame rigid with tension, his eyes locked on the space where Mr. Donovan's voice had originated. "Yes, Mr. Donovan, I'm still here," Mia called out, forcing her voice to sound normal and steady. "What can I prepare for you?" Richard Donovan appeared at the top of the grand staircase, his tall frame silhouetted against the chandelier light. He was still wearing his work clothes, an expensive charcoal suit that probably cost more than Mia made in 3 months. His salt and pepper hair was perfectly styled, his posture radiating the confidence of a man accustomed to being obeyed without question. "Just coffee," he said curtly, not looking at her as he descended the stairs. "Strong. Black. I'll be in the study for another few hours at least." He paused halfway down, finally glancing in her direction. "And Mia, make sure all the exterior doors are locked before you leave tonight. There's been some trouble in the neighborhood. Security concerns." Mia's blood ran cold. "What kind of trouble, sir?" "Nothing you need to worry about," he replied dismissively, reaching the bottom of the stairs. "Just do as I ask. Lock everything. Set the alarm system when you go." He moved toward his study without another word, and Mia released a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. She waited until she heard the study door close, then hurried back to the kitchen. Oliver hadn't moved an inch. He sat motionless, his soup growing cold, his face drained of all color. "Oliver, what's wrong?" Mia whispered urgently, returning to the table. "Do you know Mr. Donovan? Is that why you're here?" The boy's mouth opened and closed several times before any words came out. When they did, they were barely audible. "I didn't know this was his house. I swear I didn't know. I just saw the light and thought. I thought it was just any house. I didn't know." "Know what?" Mia pressed, kneeling beside his chair. "Sweetheart, you have to talk to me. Who is Mr. Donovan to you?" Oliver's eyes filled with tears that he seemed determined not to let fall. He knows my father. They're business partners. Or they were. I don't know anymore. Everything got so complicated, and then my dad started working all the time, and my mom..." His voice broke. "My mom left last year, she just left. And my dad doesn't even notice I'm there most of the time. He's always at the office or traveling or in meetings. I'm just in the way." Mia's heart shattered into pieces. She reached out and gently touched Oliver's face, wiping away a tear that had escaped despite his best efforts. "Is that why you ran away? Because you felt invisible?" He nodded, the movement jerky and painful to watch. "I thought maybe if I disappeared someone would notice. Someone would care. But it's been 2 days and nobody's looking for me. Nobody even called my phone. I threw it away yesterday because I kept checking it, hoping." He couldn't finish the sentence. "Oliver," Mia said softly but firmly. "What's your last name?" He hesitated, then whispered, "Sterling. Oliver Sterling." The name hit Mia like a physical blow. Sterling. She'd heard that name before, seen it in the newspapers Mr. Donovan left scattered around the house. James Sterling, the CEO of Sterling Industries, one of the largest tech companies on the East Coast. A man whose face appeared regularly in business magazines, whose net worth was discussed in financial news segments, whose company had just closed a massive deal that had made headlines for weeks. And this small, shivering, starving boy was his son. "Oh my God," Mia breathed. "Oliver, your father must be frantic. The police must be searching everywhere. This must be all over the news." But even as she said it, she realized something was wrong. If the son of James Sterling had been missing for 2 days, it would be the only story anyone was talking about. There would be Amber Alerts, press conferences, massive search operations. Yet she'd heard nothing, seen nothing. Mr. Donovan had mentioned security concerns, but nothing about a missing child. Oliver seemed to read her thoughts. "He doesn't know I'm gone," he said flatly. "He's been in San Francisco for a week at some conference. He thinks I'm with my nanny, but I fired her." "You fired her?" Mia repeated, incredulous. She was mean, Oliver said simply. She spent all day on her phone and only talked to me to tell me to be quiet. So I told her my dad didn't need her anymore and she should leave. She did. She didn't even check with him. She just took her last paycheck and left. And your father didn't notice? Oliver's laugh was bitter and heartbreaking. He pays people to notice things for him. He probably thinks everything's fine because nobody's called to complain. Mia stood and paced the kitchen, trying to process everything. This child, this frightened, neglected child, was the son of one of the most powerful men in the country, and he'd been wandering the streets for days, alone and hungry, while his father remained oblivious in another city. She thought about the promise Oliver had made earlier. I'll make you rich someday. At the time, it had seemed like a child's fantasy. Now it took on a different meaning entirely. This boy actually could make that promise a reality. He was an heir to a fortune most people couldn't even imagine. But looking at him now, small and vulnerable with dirt under his fingernails and cuts on his feet, all she saw was a child who needed protection. We have to call your father, Mia said gently but firmly. Oliver, I know you're hurting, and I know you feel like he doesn't care, but he doesn't. Oliver's voice rose, then immediately dropped to a whisper when he remembered Mr. Donovan was just rooms away. He doesn't care, Mia. If he did, he would have noticed I was gone. He would have checked in. He would have been there. Maybe he doesn't know how, Mia suggested carefully. Some people, especially people with a lot of responsibility, they forget how to be present with the people who matter most. It doesn't mean they don't love you. Oliver wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. Do you have kids? The question caught Mia off guard. I have a son, Marcus. He's 24 now, lives in Boston. Do you see him a lot? Not as much as I'd like, Mia admitted. But we talk on the phone every week. He knows I love him. He knows I'd drop everything if he needed me. That's what parents are supposed to do, Oliver said quietly. Drop everything. But my dad, his company is his real child. I'm just an obligation he inherited when my mom left. Before Mia could respond, they both heard something that made her blood freeze. The front door opening. Voices in the foyer. Multiple voices. Urgent and tense. Richard, a woman's voice called out. Mrs. Donovan suddenly alert despite her earlier headache. Richard, come out here right now. Heavy footsteps emerged from the study. Victoria, what's going on? Who are these people? FBI, Mr. Donovan. A male voice, authoritative and calm. Agent Carson, we need to speak with you immediately. It's about James Sterling's son. Mia's eyes locked with Oliver's. The boy had gone completely pale, his small hands gripping the edge of the table so hard his knuckles turned white. What about James's son? Mr. Donovan's voice carried clearly into the kitchen. What's happened? Oliver Sterling has been missing for 48 hours, Agent Carson said. His father finally realized he wasn't with his nanny and filed a report this morning. We're canvassing the neighborhood because this was one of the last locations pinged by his cell phone before it was destroyed or discarded. We need to search your property and ask you some questions. Of course, Mr. Donovan said immediately. Search anywhere you need. But I haven't seen the boy. I didn't even know he was missing. James didn't say anything, but then, we haven't spoken in a few days. Business has been chaotic. We understand. We're checking every residence within a 3-mile radius. The boy is 8 years old. Dark hair, brown eyes, last seen wearing jeans and a blue jacket. If you see anything, hear anything, you contact us immediately. Mia looked at Oliver, whose blue jacket, now draped over a chair to dry, was clearly visible in the kitchen. His jeans were torn and muddy. Every detail matched the description perfectly. She had seconds to make a decision that would change everything. She could call out right now, alert the FBI, reunite this child with his father, do the responsible, legal thing. Oliver would be safe, fed, protected. She would be praised for her help, maybe even rewarded. But she looked at Oliver's face, at the absolute terror written there, at the way his small body seemed to be preparing to run even though he had nowhere to go, and she saw something that gave her pause. He wasn't afraid of the FBI. He wasn't afraid of being found. He was afraid of going back to a life where he was invisible, where he didn't matter, where his own father could go days without realizing he was gone. Mia. Oliver's whisper was so quiet she almost didn't hear it. Please, just one night. Let me stay just one night. Tomorrow I'll go. I'll turn myself in. I'll face whatever happens. But please, just tonight, let me feel like someone cares, like I'm not completely alone. Every rational part of Mia's brain screamed at her to do the right thing, to call out to the agents, to end this before it became something she couldn't control. But her heart, the part of her that had raised a son alone, that understood what it meant to feel abandoned and desperate, couldn't do it. She made her choice. Moving quickly and silently, she grabbed Oliver's jacket and shoes, stuffed them into a garbage bag, and shoved it under the sink. Then she pulled Oliver to his feet and guided him toward the pantry, a large walk-in space with shelves full of supplies, and more importantly, a door that locked from the inside. "Get in," she whispered urgently. "Don't make a sound. No matter what you hear, stay absolutely silent. I'll come back for you when they're gone. Do you understand?" Oliver nodded, his eyes wide but trusting. He slipped into the pantry, and Mia closed the door softly behind him, just as footsteps approached the kitchen. Agent Carson appeared in the doorway, accompanied by Mr. Donovan. The agent was tall and broad-shouldered, with sharp eyes that immediately scanned every inch of the room. "This is Mia," Mr. Donovan said. "She's our housekeeper. Mia, Agent Carson needs to ask you some questions." Mia turned to face them, praying her expression revealed nothing of the storm raging inside her. "Of course, how can I help?" Agent Carson pulled out a photograph and showed it to her. It was Oliver, smiling, clean, well-dressed, looking like a completely different child from the one hiding just feet away. "Have you seen this boy?" the agent asked. "Any time in the last 48 hours? Anywhere in the neighborhood, near the property, anywhere at all?" Mia looked at the photograph, then directly into Agent Carson's eyes, and she lied. "No," she said steadily. "I haven't seen him. I'm so sorry. I hope you find him soon." The lie sat heavy in Mia's chest, like a stone, as Agent Carson studied her face, searching for any hint of deception. She forced herself to maintain eye contact, to keep her breathing steady, to appear nothing more than a concerned employee hoping to help. "You're certain?" the agent pressed, his tone neutral but probing. "You haven't heard anything unusual tonight? No sounds outside, no one trying doors or windows?" "Nothing," Mia said, and the word tasted like ash in her mouth. "It's been a quiet evening. Just me cleaning up after the dinner party." Agent Carson nodded slowly, then turned his attention to the kitchen itself. His eyes swept across the countertops, the stove, the table where Oliver had been sitting just minutes ago. Mia's heart nearly stopped when she realized the second bowl, Oliver's bowl, was still there, half full of soup that was still faintly steaming. "Working late, are we?" Agent Carson observed, gesturing toward the stove where the pot of soup still sat. "I made extra for myself," Mia said quickly, surprised by how easily the lie came. "Mr. Donovan asked for coffee, so I decided to have some dinner while I waited for him to finish working." The explanation seemed to satisfy him. He moved toward the service entrance, the door where Oliver had first appeared, and examined it carefully. "This door, is it usually locked?" "Yes, always," Mia said, walking over to demonstrate. "It locks automatically when it closes. You need a key to open it from the outside." "And you have a key?" "I do. For emergencies. Taking out trash, that sort of thing." Agent Carson tested the lock himself, then peered out into the rainy darkness beyond. The boy's last known location was approximately 2 blocks from here. If he was seeking shelter, this neighborhood would be a logical place to look. These houses are large, have multiple entry points, plenty of places to hide. "I understand," Mia said, fighting to keep her voice calm. "I'll definitely keep an eye out. If I see anything at all, I'll call immediately." From the foyer, they could hear more agents moving through the house, their footsteps echoing on the marble floors. Mrs. Donovan's voice drifted in, high-pitched with concern that sounded more performative than genuine. "This is just terrible. That poor boy. James must be absolutely beside himself." Mr. Donovan's response was too quiet to hear, but Mia caught the tone. Businesslike, detached, already thinking about how this situation might affect his relationship with Sterling Industries. Agent Carson pulled out a business card and handed it to Mia. "If anything comes to mind, any detail, no matter how small, you call this number immediately. Day or night. We have reason to believe Oliver may be in danger, not just from the elements but possibly from someone who might want to use him as leverage against his father. Do you understand the seriousness of this situation?" Mia took the card with trembling fingers. "I do, absolutely." "Good." Agent Carson's gaze lingered on her for one more moment, and Mia felt certain he could see right through her, could somehow sense the terrified child hiding just feet away. But then he turned and called out to Mr. Donovan. "We're going to check the grounds and the perimeter. Make sure your security cameras are functioning properly and save any footage from the last 72 hours. We'll need to review it." "Of course," Mr. Donovan replied. "Whatever you need." The next 30 minutes were the longest of Mia's life. She remained in the kitchen, forcing herself to clean up to act normal, while agents moved through every room of the house. She heard them on the second floor, in the basement, walking through the garden outside. Every sound made her flinch, certain they would somehow discover Oliver, certain her desperate choice would be exposed. Through it all, the pantry remained silent. Oliver, true to his word, made no sound. Finally, mercifully, the agents began to leave. Agent Carson returned to the kitchen one last time, his expression grave. "We're moving on to the next property. But Mia, I want to emphasize again, if you see this boy, your first instinct might be to help him, to protect him. But the best thing you can do is contact us immediately. His father needs to know he's safe. Every hour that passes puts him at greater risk." "I understand completely," Mia said, and she meant it even as she had no intention of following that instruction. When the last agent finally departed and the front door closed, Mia sagged against the counter, her legs nearly giving out beneath her. She heard Mr. and Mrs. Donovan talking in low voices in the foyer. Heard Mr. Donovan return to his study, heard Mrs. Donovan climb the stairs to her bedroom. She waited another 10 minutes just to be safe, then hurried to the pantry and eased open the door. Oliver sat huddled on the floor between bags of rice and flour, his arms wrapped around his knees, his face buried against them. He was shaking, not from cold this time, but from fear and relief and overwhelming emotion. "They're gone," Mia whispered, kneeling beside him. "You're safe. They're gone." Oliver looked up at her with eyes that were red from crying silently in the dark. "You didn't tell them," he said, his voice thick with disbelief. "Why didn't you tell them? You could get in so much trouble. You could go to jail. Why would you risk that for me?" Mia reached out and pulled him into her arms, feeling his small body collapse against her. "Because you asked me to," she said simply. "Because you needed someone to choose you. Just once. Because I looked at you and saw my own son at your age needing someone to see him as more than an inconvenience." Oliver clung to her like a drowning person clutching a lifeline. "I'm so scared," he whispered. "I don't want to go back. I don't want to be invisible again." "I know, baby, I know." Mia stroked his hair gently. "But Oliver, you heard what they said. Your father filed a report. That means he knows you're gone. That means he's looking for you. Only because someone probably told him it would look bad if he didn't," Oliver said bitterly, pulling back to look at her. "Not because he actually misses me. You don't know that." "Yes, I do." Oliver's voice was firm with a certainty no 8-year-old should possess. "My dad loves his company. He loves his reputation. He loves being important. But me? I'm just something he has to manage. Like a board meeting or a quarterly report." Mia's heart broke all over again. She stood and helped Oliver to his feet, then led him back to the table. "Sit. Finish your soup. We need to figure out what to do." As Oliver ate, more slowly now, with less desperation, Mia paced the kitchen, her mind racing. She'd just lied to federal agents. She was harboring a missing child whose disappearance was clearly a major law enforcement priority. Every moment she kept Oliver hidden, she was digging herself deeper into a situation that could destroy her life. But when she looked at him, really looked at him, she saw a child who had been failed by every adult who was supposed to protect him. A child who had spent days alone and terrified because the one person who should have noticed his absence was too distracted to care. "I'll make you a deal," Mia said finally, sitting down across from him. "You can stay here tonight. I'll keep you safe. But tomorrow morning we call your father. Not the FBI, not the police, your father directly. And you talk to him. You tell him how you feel. You tell him why you ran. You give him a chance to be the parent you need." Oliver's expression was skeptical. "And if he doesn't care? If he's just angry that I caused problems? Then we'll figure out something else," Mia promised. "But you have to give him a chance, Oliver. He might surprise you." "Adults don't surprise me anymore," Oliver said quietly. "They only disappoint." The words hung in the air like an indictment of everyone who had brought this child to such a dark place. "Where are you going to tell them you've been?" Mia asked. "When they eventually find you, they'll want to know how you survived where you stayed." Oliver thought about this. "I'll say I was moving around, hiding in different places, that I was scared and confused. It's not really a lie. I was doing that until I found you. And tonight? Tonight I was never here," Oliver said firmly. "You never saw me. You don't know anything. If they find out you helped me, I'll say I snuck in without you knowing. I'll say I hid and you had no idea. I won't let you get in trouble because of me." Mia smiled sadly. You're very mature for 8 years old, you know that? I had to grow up fast, Oliver said. When your mom leaves and your dad forgets you exist, you either grow up or fall apart. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the situation settling around them like the rain that continued to hammer against the windows. I need to get you somewhere safe for the night, Mia said finally. The Donovans might come down to the kitchen. Mrs. Donovan sometimes gets hungry late at night, and if those agents come back, where can I go? Mia thought quickly. The house was large, but the Donovans used most of it. Guest rooms, master suite, home office, entertainment spaces, all places where Oliver might be discovered. But there was one space they never entered, one place in the entire mansion that belonged exclusively to Mia. The service quarters, she said. There's a small room on the 3rd floor where I sometimes rest if I'm working very late. The Donovans never go up there, you'll be safe. Oliver nodded. Okay, I trust you. By those 3 words, I trust you, hit Mia harder than anything else that had happened that night. This child, who had every reason to trust no one, was placing his safety entirely in her hands. Come on, she said gently. Let's get you upstairs, and tomorrow we face whatever comes next, together. As they moved quietly through the darkened house, climbing the servants' staircase to the 3rd floor, Mia couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just crossed a line she could never uncross. She'd lied to federal agents. She was hiding a child whose father was probably frantic by now, or should be. She'd risked everything she had for a boy she'd known for less than 3 hours. But when they reached the small service room, and she saw Oliver's face relax with relief, saw him look at the simple bed like it was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen, she knew she'd made the right choice. Thank you, Oliver whispered as he climbed onto the bed, still wearing the clothes that were finally starting to dry. Thank you for seeing me, for treating me like I matter. You do matter, Mia said firmly, tucking a blanket around him. Don't you ever forget that. You matter more than any company, any amount of money, any business deal. You matter because you're you. Oliver's eyes were already drifting closed, exhaustion finally claiming him. I meant what I said before, he murmured. About making you rich someday. I'll find a way. I promise. Sleep now, Mia said softly, brushing his hair back from his forehead. We'll worry about the future tomorrow. She stayed with him until his breathing deepened and evened out, until she was certain he was truly asleep. Then she returned downstairs, her mind spinning with everything that had happened, everything that could still go wrong. In the kitchen, she saw Agent Carson's business card still sitting on the counter where she'd left it. She picked it up, studied the phone number printed there, thought about how easy it would be to call, to end this, to do what everyone would call the right thing. Instead, she tucked the card into her pocket and began the final cleanup of the night. Tomorrow would bring consequences. Tomorrow would bring decisions she couldn't avoid. Tomorrow, Oliver's father would need to be contacted and the truth would have to come out, at least some version of it. But tonight, a child who had been invisible for too long was finally seen. A child who had been hungry was finally fed. A child who had been alone was finally safe. And for Mia, that was enough to justify every risk she'd taken, every lie she'd told, every rule she'd broken. She just hoped that when the truth finally emerged, everyone else would understand. But deep down, she knew they wouldn't. Mia barely slept that night. She'd returned to her tiny studio apartment after midnight, her clothes still damp from the rain, her mind refusing to stop replaying every moment of the evening. She lay on her worn mattress, staring at the water-stained ceiling, listening to the sounds of the city outside her window, sirens in the distance, the rumble of late-night traffic, the endless rhythm of a world that kept moving, even when your own had just tilted sideways. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Oliver's face, that mixture of hope and fear, the way he'd looked at her like she was the first person in years to really see him. And she thought about Agent Carson's words, every hour that passes puts him at greater risk. Was she putting him at greater risk? Or was she the only thing standing between him and a life of continued neglect? At 5:30 in the morning, she gave up on sleep entirely. She showered, dressed in her usual work clothes, simple black pants and a gray shirt that had been washed so many times it had gone soft and thin, and caught the early bus back to the Donovan mansion. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the streets slick and gleaming under the streetlights. As the bus rumbled through the awakening city, Mia watched the sunrise paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. It felt surreal, that beauty, against the chaos of everything happening in her life. She arrived at the mansion just after 6:30. The house was still quiet, the Donovans not yet awake. This was Mia's favorite time, the peaceful hours before the demands began, when she could move through the rooms and pretend, just for a moment, that this life belonged to her. But today, peace was impossible. She climbed the servants' staircase to the third floor, her heart pounding harder with each step. What if Oliver had panicked during the night? What if he'd tried to leave and been caught? What if Mr. Donovan had somehow discovered him? But when she quietly opened the door to the service room, she found Oliver exactly where she'd left him, still asleep, curled up under the blanket like a child who finally felt safe enough to rest. She stood in the doorway for a long moment, watching the gentle rise and fall of his breathing. In sleep, he looked even younger than 8, vulnerable and innocent, all the adult wariness stripped away from his features. "Oliver," she whispered gently, "it's time to wake up." His eyes fluttered open immediately, and for a split second, confusion crossed his face. Then memory returned, and with it, that cautious guardedness that no child should have to carry. "Is it morning already?" he asked, sitting up and rubbing his eyes. "It is, and we need to talk about what happens next." Mia entered the room and sat on the edge of the bed. "How did you sleep?" "Better than I have in months," Oliver admitted. "I actually felt safe. I wasn't afraid someone would hurt me or that I'd wake up freezing or that." He trailed off, but Mia understood. He'd spent 2 nights in circumstances no child should ever experience. "I brought you some clean clothes," Mia said, pulling a small bundle from her bag. "They're from a donation box at my church. They might not fit perfectly, but they're better than what you're wearing." Oliver looked down at his torn, dirty clothes. "Thank you, for everything. I know you didn't have to do any of this. We need to call your father today," Mia said gently but firmly. "I gave you last night like I promised. But Oliver, this can't continue. Your father needs to know you're safe, and we need to figure out how to make sure this never happens again." Oliver's expression closed off immediately. What if he doesn't care? What if he's just relieved I'm alive so it doesn't hurt his reputation? But nothing actually changes. "Then we cross that bridge when we come to it," Mia said. "But you can't run forever, sweetheart, and more importantly, you shouldn't have to." Before Oliver could respond, they both heard it. Voices downstairs. Multiple voices. Urgent and commanding. "Richard! Richard, wake up! They're back!" Mrs. Donovan's shrill voice cut through the morning quiet like an alarm. Mia's blood turned to ice. She moved quickly to the small window and peered out. In the circular driveway below, she could see 3 black SUVs, their doors emblazoned with FBI insignia. Agents were already at the front door, and more were spreading out across the property. "They're searching again," Mia whispered, her mind racing. "They must have new information." "Oliver, did you have anything with you? Anything that could have left a trail?" Oliver thought frantically. "My phone, but I threw it in a dumpster 2 days ago. And I had my wallet, but I left it in my backpack when I—" He stopped, his face going pale. "My backpack. I left it in an alley about 3 blocks from here. There might be things in it. Papers from school with my address on them, a library card, some drawings I made." "What kind of drawings?" "Just pictures. Buildings I liked. Places I wanted to visit." Then his eyes widened with horror. "Wait, there was one. A map. I drew a map of this neighborhood because I used to come here with my dad sometimes when he visited Mr. Donovan. I marked places where I thought I could hide if I needed to." Mia's heart sank. If the FBI had found that backpack, if they'd seen that map, they'd know Oliver had specifically targeted this area. They'd be much more thorough in their search this time. "We need to get you out of this house," Mia said urgently. "Right now." "How?" "There are agents everywhere," Mia thought quickly. The mansion had multiple exits, but all of them would be monitored now. Except, there was one way out that almost no one knew about. Years ago, when the house had been built, a coal chute had been installed for deliveries to the basement furnace. It had been sealed off decades ago when the house converted to modern heating, but Mia had discovered it during a deep cleaning session. The chute was narrow and dark, but it led directly to the outside, emerging near the property's back wall where overgrown bushes provided cover. "I have an idea," Mia said, "but you're going to have to trust me completely, and you're going to have to be very, very brave." Oliver stood, already pulling on the clean clothes she'd brought. "I trust you. Tell me what to do." They moved quickly and quietly down the back staircase, Mia leading the way and listening carefully for any sounds of agents in the house. She could hear Mr. Donovan's voice in the foyer, sounding irritated at being woken so early. Mrs. Donovan was complaining loudly about the intrusion. They reached the basement without being spotted. Mia led Oliver through the maze of storage rooms and utility spaces to the far corner, where an old metal panel was covered by stacks of unused furniture. "Help me move these," Mia whispered. Working together, they shifted the furniture just enough to reveal the panel. Mia pulled it open, revealing a dark, narrow tunnel that slanted upward at a steep angle. "This leads outside," she explained quietly. "It's about 20 feet long. You'll have to crawl, and it's going to be tight and dark and scary. But when you get to the other end, you'll be outside the property behind some bushes. There's a park about 2 blocks to the east. Do you know which way east is?" Oliver nodded. "I'm good with directions. Go to the park. Find a public place. The playground, near the fountain, somewhere visible. Then wait exactly 30 minutes. I'm going to call your father directly, and I'm going to tell him where you are. I'm going to tell him that you need him to come alone, without FBI, without security, without anyone else. Just him. Can you wait 30 minutes? Yes, but Mia, what about you? They'll know you helped me. They'll arrest you. I'll deal with whatever consequences come," Mia said firmly. "But Oliver, this is your chance. Your chance to talk to your father. Really talk to him before everyone else gets involved. To tell him how you feel. To see if he's capable of being the parent you need. If he shows up alone like I'll ask him to, that's a good sign. If he doesn't," she left the thought unfinished. Oliver suddenly threw his arms around her waist, hugging her tightly. "Thank you for seeing me," he whispered. "Thank you for making me feel like I mattered." Mia hugged him back, fighting tears. "You do matter, and no matter what happens after today, you remember that. Promise me." "I promise." They heard footsteps on the floor above them, heavy boots, methodical and searching. "Go now," Mia urged. "Hurry." Oliver climbed into the coal chute without hesitation, disappearing into the darkness. Mia watched until she could no longer see him, then carefully moved the furniture back into place and hurried upstairs. She emerged into the kitchen just as Agent Carson entered from the opposite doorway. His eyes narrowed when he saw her. "Ms. Mia, you're here early." "I always arrive at this time," she said, forcing her voice to remain calm even though her heart was hammering. "I have breakfast to prepare for the Donovans. We found Oliver Sterling's backpack," Agent Carson said, watching her face carefully. 3 blocks from here in an alley. Inside was a hand-drawn map of this neighborhood. This house was circled. Multiple potential hiding spots were marked. "So I'm going to ask you again, and I need you to think very carefully before you answer. Have you seen Oliver Sterling?" Mia met his gaze steadily. The lie came easier this time, smoothed by practice and necessity. "No, I haven't seen him. We're going to search every inch of this property," Agent Carson continued. "Every room, every closet, every space large enough for a child to hide. If he's here, we'll find him. Then you should start searching," Mia said calmly. "The sooner you finish, the sooner you can move on to other leads." Agent Carson studied her for a long moment, clearly trying to determine if she was lying. But Mia had had a lifetime of practice at being invisible, at showing only what others expected to see. She let him look, knowing he would find nothing in her expression to raise suspicion. "We'll be here for a while," he finally said. "Don't leave the property until we've finished." "I won't," Mia agreed. "I have work to do anyway." As Agent Carson left to coordinate with his team, Mia pulled out her phone with trembling hands. She'd told Oliver she'd call his father, and she would keep that promise. But first, she needed to find James Sterling's contact information. A quick internet search revealed the main number for Sterling Industries. It would have to do. She dialed, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. After several rings and being transferred twice, a crisp female voice answered. "James Sterling's office. This is Rebecca. How may I help you?" "I need to speak with Mr. Sterling immediately," Mia said. "It's about his son." There was a pause. "Mr. Sterling is not taking calls at this time. If you have information about Oliver, you should contact the FBI at—" "Tell him that Oliver is safe," Mia interrupted. "Tell him that Oliver wants to see him. Only him. No FBI, no security, no lawyers. Just him. And tell him if he wants his son back, he'll come alone to Patterson Park, by the fountain in exactly 25 minutes. Can you deliver that message?" "Who is this?" Rebecca demanded. "How do I know this isn't a hoax or—" "You don't," Mia said. "But if Mr. Sterling cares at all about his son, he'll come. 25 minutes. Patterson Park. Come alone." She hung up before the secretary could respond or try to trace the call. Now there was nothing to do but wait. Wait and hope that James Sterling loved his son enough to show up. Hope that Oliver would get the chance to finally be heard. Hope that somehow, despite all the lies and risks and chaos, something good might come from this impossible situation. Upstairs, She could hear agents moving through the house, methodically searching every space. They wouldn't find Oliver, but they would have questions. So many questions. And soon, Mia would have to face the consequences of every choice she'd made over the past 12 hours. But if Oliver got his moment with his father, if that broken, neglected child got a chance at being truly seen, then whatever happened to her would be worth it. She just hoped she was right. James Sterling sat in his San Francisco hotel suite, staring at the Wall Street Journal without actually reading a single word. The article about his company's latest merger should have commanded his full attention. It was the culmination of 18 months of negotiations, a deal that would reshape the entire tech industry landscape. But for the first time in his career, business felt utterly meaningless. His son was missing, had been missing for 48 hours before anyone even noticed. And that fact, that devastating, unforgivable fact, sat in his chest like a physical weight. The phone on the desk rang and James grabbed it immediately, hoping for news. "Sterling. Mr. Sterling, this is Rebecca." His secretary's voice was tight with tension. "I just received a very strange call. Someone claiming to have information about Oliver." James was on his feet instantly. "What did they say? Did you trace it?" "They said Oliver is safe, that he wants to see you. Only you. No FBI. No security. Just you." They gave a specific location and time, Patterson Park, by the Fountain Inn. She paused, clearly looking at a clock. 23 minutes now. "That's near Richard Donovan's house," James said, his mind racing. Did they say anything else? Who they were? How they found him? Nothing. It was a woman's voice. She sounded genuine, if that helps. Not threatening or demanding ransom. She just said, "If you care about your son, you'll come alone." James was already grabbing his jacket, his keys. "Call Agent Carson. Tell him." "Sir," she specifically said no FBI. "If you bring them." "I don't care what she said," James snapped. "My son could be in danger. This could be a kidnapping situation, a ransom play, anything. I'm not walking into a potential trap without backup." "Of course, sir. I'll make the calls." James hung up and was out the door within seconds. His hotel suite abandoned, the merger documents forgotten. His hands shook as he climbed into his rental car. 23 minutes. Patterson Park was at least a 30-minute drive in San Francisco traffic, and he wasn't even in the right city. He'd flown back to the Bay Area yesterday when the FBI had finally called to inform him that his son, had been missing for over 24 hours and no one had thought to notify him immediately. Wait, Rebecca had said Patterson Park. That was in Connecticut, not San Francisco. Which meant, his phone rang again. Agent Carson. "Mr. Sterling, my team is already at the Donovan property conducting a search. Your secretary just relayed this information about the park. I have agents positioned throughout the area. We can have them move in." "No," James said sharply, a sudden clarity cutting through his panic. "The caller said to come alone. If Oliver is there, if he ran away and is scared, seeing FBI agents will terrify him. It will make everything worse. Sir, with all due respect, this could be a dangerous situation. We don't know who this caller is or what their intentions are. Their intention was to return my son to me," James said, something in his gut telling him this was true. If they wanted ransom, they would have demanded it. If they wanted to hurt him, they wouldn't have kept him safe for 2 days. "Someone found my son and is trying to do the right thing, so I'm going to do what they asked. I'm going to meet my son. Alone. I strongly advise against." "Noted, but I'm not asking for permission." James ended the call and immediately dialed his pilot. "How fast can you get the jet ready? I need to be in Connecticut in the next 15 minutes. "Sir, that's impossible. Even if we left right now, then we leave right now. I'll be at the airport in 8 minutes. Have the engines running." James drove faster than he'd driven in 20 years, weaving through traffic with a recklessness that would have horrified his security team. His mind kept circling back to one terrible, inescapable truth. His son had been gone for days and James hadn't noticed, hadn't checked in, hadn't called, had assumed everything was fine because no one had told him otherwise. What kind of father did that make him? The private jet was ready when he arrived and they were airborne within minutes. James sat in the leather seat, his knee bouncing with nervous energy, checking his watch every 30 seconds. Even with the jet, even with perfect conditions, they wouldn't make it in 20 minutes. Oliver would be waiting, alone, probably scared, possibly thinking his father didn't care enough to show up. "Can this plane go any faster?" James asked the pilot through the intercom. "We're already pushing the limits, sir. We'll be there as fast as physically possible." It wasn't fast enough. Nothing would be fast enough. James thought about the last real conversation he'd had with Oliver. It had been, when? Weeks ago? A month? They'd talked about school, he remembered that much. Oliver had mentioned something about a science project. Or was it a book report? James couldn't remember. He'd been distracted, reviewing contracts on his laptop while Oliver spoke, offering absent-minded encouragement without really listening. When had his son become an afterthought? When had Sterling Industries become more important than the small boy who used to wait by the door every evening, excited to show his father drawings and test scores and stories from his day? The answer was obvious and damning. It had happened gradually, so slowly James hadn't noticed the transformation. After Oliver's mother left, after the divorce that had been bitter and public and devastating, James had thrown himself into work. It was easier to lose himself in board meetings and acquisition strategies than to face the grief in his son's eyes, the questions James couldn't answer about why Mommy had left and wasn't coming back. He'd hired the best nannies, enrolled Oliver in the finest private school, made sure every physical need was met. But emotional needs? The need to be seen, to be heard, to matter to the one parent he had left? James had failed completely. The jet touched down 47 minutes after the mysterious call. James was off the plane before it had fully stopped, racing toward the waiting car his secretary had arranged. The driver started to speak, but James cut him off. Patterson Park. As fast as you can. They arrived at the park 53 minutes after the initial deadline. James jumped out of the car while it was still moving, his eyes scanning the area frantically. The park was small, dotted with bare trees and patches of brown grass. The fountain at its center was turned off for the winter, dry and silent. And sitting on the fountain's edge, looking impossibly small and alone, was Oliver. James's breath caught in his throat. His son was alive, safe, right there. Oliver hadn't seen him yet. The boy sat with his shoulders hunched, his hands clasped in his lap, his eyes fixed on the ground. He was wearing clothes that didn't quite fit. His hair was disheveled, and even from a distance James could see the cuts and bruises on his exposed skin. What had happened to him? Where had he been? Who had kept him safe? James started walking toward the fountain, then broke into a run. Oliver! His son's head snapped up, and for one terrible moment James saw fear flash across Oliver's face, then recognition, then something more complicated, hope mixed with doubt, relief mixed with anger. "Dad?" Oliver's voice was small and uncertain. James reached him and dropped to his knees on the concrete, pulling Oliver into his arms without thinking, without planning, just needing to feel that his son was real and whole and alive. "Oh God, Oliver. Oliver, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." He felt Oliver stiffen in his embrace, not returning the hug immediately. When the boy finally did wrap his arms around James's neck, his small body was shaking. "You came," Oliver whispered. "You actually came." "Of course I came," James said, his voice breaking. "Of course I came. Oliver, I've been out of my mind. When they told me you were missing, when I realized..." He pulled back to look at his son's face, to check for injuries, to reassure himself that Oliver was truly okay. "What happened? Where have you been? Did someone take you? Did someone hurt you?" Oliver's expression was guarded, so much older than his 8 years. "Nobody took me. I ran away." The words hit James like a physical blow. You ran away? Why? Oliver, why would you?" "Because you didn't even notice I was gone." Oliver's voice was quiet but steady, each word landing with devastating precision. "I've been missing for 3 days, Dad. 3 days. And you didn't know. You didn't call. You didn't check. I could have been dead, and you wouldn't have known until someone told you." James felt something crack open inside his chest. "Oliver, I fired my nanny," Oliver continued, his dark eyes locked on his father's face, refusing to look away. "I told her to leave, and she did. And then I was alone in that big house for a whole day before I decided to run away. A whole day, Dad. And you never called. Not once. I thought you were with her," James said weakly, knowing how pathetic that sounded. "I thought everything was fine. You thought you could just pay people to raise me," Oliver finished. "You thought as long as nothing went wrong, as long as nobody complained, you didn't actually have to be my father. You didn't have to notice me or talk to me or care about what I was doing or how I was feeling." Each word was true, and each one cut deeper than any knife. James had no defense, no excuse that wouldn't sound hollow and self-serving. "You're right," he said finally, his voice raw. "You're absolutely right. I've been a terrible father. I've been absent and distracted. and I've treated you like an obligation instead of my son, and I'm sorry. God, Oliver, I'm so sorry." Oliver's lower lip trembled, but he didn't cry. Being sorry doesn't change anything. Words are easy, Dad. You've said you'd be better before. You've promised to spend more time with me before. But then something comes up at work, some meeting or deal or crisis, and I disappear again. I'm always going to come second to Sterling Industries. I know that now. "No," James said firmly, taking Oliver's hands in his own. "No, that's not true. Or it wasn't supposed to be true. I never meant." He struggled to find the right words that could bridge the impossible distance that had grown between them. "When your mother left, I didn't know how to handle it. I didn't know how to be both parents. So I threw myself into work because that was something I understood, something I could control. But you're right. I used work as an excuse to avoid the hard parts of parenting, the emotional parts, the parts that actually matter." "So what's going to change?" Oliver challenged. "What's different now?" James looked at his son, really looked at him maybe for the first time in years, and saw a child who had been forced to grow up too fast, who had learned that love was conditional and attention had to be earned, who had spent 3 days alone and terrified because he didn't believe anyone would miss him. "Everything changes," James said with a conviction he hadn't felt about anything in years. "Everything. I'm going to sell the company." Oliver's eyes went wide. "What?" "Sterling Industries. I'm going to sell it. I'll stay on as a consultant if they want, but I'm stepping down as CEO. The merger we just completed makes it the perfect time. The company is more valuable than it's ever been, and He paused, feeling the truth of his next words settle into place. "I need to be your father more than I need to be a CEO. And I can't do both, not the way both jobs deserve." "You'd really do that?" Oliver's voice was filled with disbelief and fragile hope. "You'd give up the company? For me? You're my son," James said simply. "You're more important than any company, any amount of money, any business achievement. I should have realized that a long time ago. I'm sorry it took almost losing you for me to figure it out." Tears finally spilled down Oliver's cheeks. "I was so scared, Dad. I was so cold and hungry and scared. And I kept thinking you'd realize I was gone. I kept checking my phone, hoping you'd call, but you never did." James pulled Oliver close again, and this time his son melted into the embrace, his small body finally releasing all the fear and grief and loneliness he'd been carrying. I know, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, but I'm here now. I'm here and I'm not leaving, and we're going to figure this out together, okay? You and me, together." They stayed like that for a long time, father and son, while the morning sun climbed higher in the sky and the world moved around them. James felt something fundamental shifting inside him, priorities rearranging themselves, the fog of the past few years finally lifting. Eventually, Oliver pulled back and wiped his eyes. "There's something I need to tell you, about where I stayed last night, about who helped me." "Okay," James said gently. "Tell me." "Her name is Mia," Oliver began. "She's a maid who works at Mr. Donovan's house. And Dad. She saved my life." James listened in stunned silence as Oliver told him everything, how he'd wandered the streets for 2 days, cold and hungry and alone, until he'd found his way to the Donovan mansion, how Mia had opened the door and pulled him inside without hesitation, fed him, kept him warm, protected him from the FBI agents searching the house, how she'd risked everything, her job, her freedom, possibly years in prison, for a child she'd just met. "She could have turned me in immediately," Oliver said, his voice thick with emotion. "She could have called the police the second she saw me, but she didn't. She asked me what I needed. She listened to me. She made me feel like I mattered, like I was actually worth something." James felt his throat tighten. A stranger, a woman who cleaned houses for barely enough money to survive, had done more for his son in one night than he'd done in months, maybe years. "Where is she now?" James asked. "Still at the house, I think. The FBI was searching when we left. Dad, you have to help her. She lied to federal agents for me. She could go to jail, and it's not fair. She was just being kind. She was just being the person I needed when nobody else was there." James stood, pulling Oliver up with him. "Come on. We're going back to the Donovan house right now. But the FBI, let me handle them," James said firmly. "Nobody's going to punish the woman who kept my son safe, I promise you that." They climbed into the waiting car and James gave the driver the Donovan address. As they drove through the quiet suburban streets, James kept one arm around Oliver's shoulders, still unable to fully believe his son was really here, really safe. He pulled out his phone and called Agent Carson. "Mr. Sterling, thank God. Did you find him? Is Oliver? He's with me. He's safe. We're heading back to the Donovan property now. Sir, we're still conducting the search here. We found evidence that someone may have been hiding Oliver in the house. The housekeeper has been evasive in her answers, and we believe— Agent Carson, James interrupted, his voice carrying the authority of a man accustomed to being obeyed. The housekeeper's name is Mia, and she's the reason my son is alive and unharmed. Whatever questions you have for her, you can ask them in my presence. And I'm instructing my legal team to provide her with representation if she needs it. Is that clear? There was a pause. Mr. Sterling, obstruction of a federal investigation is a serious crime. If this woman knowingly harbored your son and lied to agents, she protected a terrified child who asked for help, James said coldly. She fed him, kept him warm, and made sure he was safe until I could get here. If you want to press charges against someone for that, you'll have to go through me first. And trust me, Agent Carson, that's a fight you don't want. Another pause. We'll discuss this when you arrive, sir. James hung up and looked at Oliver. It's going to be okay. I won't let anything happen to her. Promise. Oliver's voice was small and uncertain. I promise. When they arrived at the Donovan mansion, the scene was even more chaotic than James had anticipated. FBI vehicles lined the street, agents moved in and out of the house, and a small crowd of neighbors had gathered at a distance, watching the drama unfold. James saw Richard Donovan standing on the front steps, talking to Agent Carson with animated gestures that suggested frustration and confusion. James and Oliver climbed out of the car, and immediately every head turned toward them. There was a moment of stunned silence, then a flurry of activity as agents moved toward them. Oliver, Agent Carson called out, starting down the steps. Oliver, are you all right? Did anyone hurt you? But Oliver wasn't looking at the agent. His eyes were scanning the crowd of people, searching for one specific face. Where's Mia? He called out. Where is she? James followed his son's gaze and finally spotted her, standing off to the side near the service entrance, flanked by two agents. She looked small and tired, her hands clasped in front of her, her expression carefully neutral. But when she saw Oliver, relief flooded her features so completely that James felt his chest tighten with emotion. Oliver broke away from his father and ran toward her. Mia. The agents moved to intercept him, but James barked out, "Let him through." Something in his tone made them hesitate just long enough for Oliver to reach Mia. He threw his arms around her waist and she dropped to her knees, hugging him back tightly, her eyes squeezed shut. "You're okay," she whispered. "Thank God you're okay. Did your father come?" "Did he?" "He came," Oliver said, pulling back to look at her face. "He came alone, just like you said, and Mia, he listened, he really listened. He's going to change everything, he promised." Mia's eyes lifted to meet James's gaze across the driveway. For a long moment they simply looked at each other, this wealthy CEO and this humble maid who had saved his son's life. James saw exhaustion in her face, and fear, and a fierce protective love for a child she barely knew. He walked toward them slowly, aware that every agent, every neighbor, every person present was watching this moment unfold. "Ms. Mia," he said when he reached them, "I'm James Sterling, Oliver's father." "I know who you are, sir," Mia said quietly, straightening but keeping one hand on Oliver's shoulder. "I'm sorry for any trouble I've caused. I couldn't turn him away. He needed help." "You have nothing to apologize for," James said firmly. He turned to Agent Carson, who had followed him across the driveway. "Agent Carson, this woman is a hero. She found my son when he was desperate and scared, and she kept him safe until I could get here. I don't want her questioned, harassed, or charged with anything. Is that understood?" "Mr. Sterling, she lied to federal agents during an active investigation. She protected a child," James repeated, his voice hardening. "A child who was failed by every adult who was supposed to care for him, myself included. She gave him food and shelter when he had neither. She made him feel valued when no one else did. And if you want to punish her for that basic human decency, then I'll make it my personal mission to ensure that every news outlet in the country knows exactly what the FBI considers a crime." Agent Carson's jaw tightened, but he was smart enough to recognize a losing battle. "We'll need a statement from both of you," he said finally. "A full accounting of what happened over the past 48 hours. After that," he looked at Mia, his expression softening slightly. "After that, I think we can consider this matter closed." Mia's shoulders sagged with relief. "Thank you," she whispered. "Don't thank me," Agent Carson said. "Thank your very determined advocate here." He nodded toward Oliver, who was still pressed against Mia's side. "That kid hasn't stopped talking about you since we found him. He made it very clear that you were the only good thing that happened to him during this entire ordeal. James watched as Mia's eyes filled with tears. She looked down at Oliver, stroking his hair gently. "You're very special. You know that?" she said softly. "Don't you ever forget how much you matter, how much you're worth." "I won't," Oliver promised. "Not as long as you don't forget that you matter too." The simple exchange broke something open in James's chest. This woman, this stranger who had every reason to focus on her own survival, her own problems, had given his son something precious. She'd given him dignity, recognition, the basic human acknowledgement that he existed and was important. How much must Oliver have been starving for that if a single night with a kind stranger could impact him so profoundly? "Ms. Mia," James said, "could I speak with you privately for a moment?" She looked uncertain but nodded. "Of course." They walked a short distance away, far enough that Oliver and the agents couldn't hear their conversation. Mia's hands twisted together nervously, and James realized she was probably expecting to be reprimanded, lectured about the danger she'd put Oliver in by not calling authorities immediately. Instead, he said, "Thank you. Thank you for seeing my son when I was too blind to see him myself. Thank you for giving him what I should have been giving him all along." Mia's eyes widened with surprise. "Sir, Please, call me James." He ran a hand through his hair, trying to find the right words. "Oliver told me what he said to you about making you rich someday, about repaying your kindness." "He's just a child," Mia said quickly. "He doesn't owe me anything. I didn't help him expecting some kind of reward." "I know you didn't," James said, "but he was right. You should be repaid, not because you expect it, but because what you did was extraordinary. You risked everything for a stranger's child. That kind of compassion is rare, and it deserves to be honored." Mia shook her head. "I don't want money, Mr. Sterling." "James," he corrected gently, "and I'm not just talking about money. I'm talking about security, stability, the chance to stop worrying about whether you'll make rent, whether you'll have enough for groceries, whether one missed paycheck will destroy your life." He pulled out his phone and made a quick call. "Jennifer, it's James Sterling. I need you to draw up an employment contract immediately. Full-time position, competitive salary. Let's start at $80,000 annually with full benefits. Housing allowance, health insurance, retirement contributions. Yes, I'll send you the details. Have it ready by this afternoon." Mia was staring at him like he'd lost his mind. "Mr. Sterling, I don't understand." "I'm offering you a job," James explained, ending the call. "Not as a housekeeper, as Oliver's companion, someone who'll be there for him, who'll listen to him, who'll make sure he never feels invisible again. I know I need to step up as a father, and I will, but I also know that having someone like you in his life would be invaluable. Someone who sees him, who cares about him for who he is, not what he represents." Tears spilled down Mia's cheeks. I don't know what to say." "Say yes," James urged. "Oliver needs you, and honestly I think I need you too. I need someone who'll call me out when I start slipping back into old patterns. Someone who'll remind me what's actually important. Will you consider it?" Mia looked over at Oliver, who was watching them with hopeful eyes. Then she looked back at James, this powerful man who was offering her more than just a job. He was offering her purpose, security, and the chance to make a real difference in a child's life. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll do it." James felt relief wash over him. "Thank you. We'll work out all the details later, but for now," he gestured toward Oliver. "For now, let's just focus on getting him home and making sure he knows he's loved." They walked back to where Oliver stood, and the boy's face lit up when he saw their expressions. "Mia's coming with us?" he asked hopefully. "If that's okay with you," James said. Oliver's answer was to run to Mia and hug her again, this time with pure joy rather than desperation. "Thank you," he said into her shoulder. "Thank you for keeping your promise. Thank you for making my dad come. Thank you for everything." "You don't have to thank me, sweetheart," Mia said, her voice thick with emotion. "You just have to promise me something in return. Anything. Promise me you'll never run away again. Promise me that when things get hard, you'll talk to someone, to me, to your father, to anyone who'll listen. Promise me you'll never doubt again that you matter, that you're loved, that you're important. Can you promise me that?" Oliver nodded fiercely. "I promise." Agent Carson approached them, holding a tablet. "I need statements from both of you," he said, but his tone was gentler now. "Just a formality at this point. Ms. Mia, you're not in any trouble. We just need the official record to be complete." They spent the next hour recounting the events of the past 2 days. Oliver explaining why he'd run away, where he'd gone, how he'd ended up at the Donovan mansion. Mia describing finding him, making the choice to help him, keeping him hidden during the FBI search. James adding his perspective on realizing his son was missing, the desperate flight back to Connecticut, the moment in the park when everything had crystallized. When the statements were finally complete, Agent Carson closed his tablet and looked at the three of them, this unlikely family that had come together through crisis and compassion. "For what it's worth," he said, "I hope things work out for all of you. Oliver, you're a brave kid. Mia, you did the right thing, even when it was risky. And Mr. Sterling, I hope you keep the promises you made today." "I will," James said firmly. "That's not a hope, it's a guarantee." As the FBI vehicles finally began to leave and the crowd of neighbors dispersed, Richard Donovan approached them awkwardly. "James, I had no idea any of this was happening. If I'd known Oliver was here." "It's fine, Richard," James said. "You didn't know. How could you? But I'm going to need some time away from business matters. The partnership we discussed, the upcoming projects. I'll need you to handle things without me for a while. My priorities have shifted." Richard looked shocked but nodded. "Of course. Family comes first. I understand." After he left, James turned to Mia and Oliver. "Let's go home," he said. "We have a lot to figure out, a lot to fix, but we'll do it together. All of us." As they walked toward the car, Oliver between them, holding both their hands, Mia thought about how much had changed in 24 hours. Yesterday she'd been invisible, scrubbing floors in a house where no one saw her, struggling to make ends meet, wondering if this was all her life would ever be. Today, she had purpose. She had security. She had a child who looked at her like she'd hung the moon and a father who was finally learning what it meant to be present. "Mia," Oliver said as they reached the car, "do you remember what I told you last night about making you rich someday?" "I remember," she said with a gentle smile. "I was wrong," Oliver said seriously. "I can't make you rich, but Dad can, and he will. Right, Dad?" James opened the car door, his expression soft with an emotion Mia couldn't quite name. "She's already rich," he said quietly, "rich in all the ways that actually matter. But yes, I'm going to make sure she never has to worry about money again, because that's what you do for people who save your life. You make sure they're taken care of." "I didn't save his life," Mia protested. "I just gave him a meal and a place to sleep." "You saved more than his life," James said, meeting her eyes over Oliver's head. "You saved his spirit, his belief that goodness still exists in the world, his faith that someone might actually care. That's not something you can put a price on, but I'm going to try anyway." They climbed into the car, exhausted but hopeful, broken but beginning to heal. As they drove away from the Donovan mansion, Mia looked out the window at the neighborhood, these massive houses filled with wealth and privilege, where she'd spent years being invisible. She'd come here as a maid, unnoticed and undervalued. She was leaving as something far more important, a guardian, a protector, a person who mattered to someone who mattered. And in the back seat, Oliver leaned against her shoulder and whispered, "I'm glad I found you. I'm glad you saw me." "I'm glad I found you too," Mia whispered back. "And I'll never stop seeing you. I promise." James glanced at them in the rearview mirror, watching his son finally look peaceful for the first time, and he couldn't remember how long. He thought about the phone call he'd need to make, to his board of directors, announcing his resignation, to his lawyers, starting the process of selling Sterling Industries, to his life coach, his therapist, whoever could help him become the father Oliver deserved. It would be hard. It would mean giving up the identity he'd built over decades. But looking at Oliver's face, seeing actual hope there for the first time in years, James knew it was the easiest decision he'd ever made. Some promises were worth keeping no matter the cost. And this one, this promise to be present, to be available, to be the father his son needed, was worth more than any business empire, any amount of money, any professional achievement. 3 months later, Mia stood in the kitchen of the Sterling residence, not as a maid this time, but as a valued member of the household. She was preparing Oliver's favorite meal while he sat at the counter doing homework, chattering about his day at school, about the science project he was excited about the friend he'd made who also loved astronomy. James walked in, home by 5:30, as he'd promised he would be every single day. "Something smells amazing," he said, kissing the top of Oliver's head before grabbing a seat at the counter. "How was school, buddy?" As Oliver launched into an animated description of his day, Mia caught James's eye and smiled. He smiled back. a look of gratitude and peace on his face that hadn't been there 3 months ago. They'd kept their promises, all of them. James had sold Sterling Industries for an amount that made headlines for weeks. He'd stepped back from the business world entirely, focusing instead on being present for Oliver, learning his son's interests, attending his school events, being there for bedtime stories and morning breakfasts and all the small moments that added up to a childhood. Mia had moved into the guest house on the property, with a contract that guaranteed her security for life, and a role that went far beyond anything she'd imagined. She was Oliver's companion, his advocate, his friend. She made sure he was seen, heard, valued. She reminded James when he started slipping into old patterns. She was the bridge between father and son, helping them rebuild what had been broken. And Oliver was thriving. The haunted look had faded from his eyes. The wariness had been replaced with genuine happiness. He laughed more, talked more, trusted more. He was 8 years old again, not a tiny adult carrying burdens far too heavy for his small shoulders. "Mia made your favorite," James was saying, and Oliver's eyes lit up. "Really? With the garlic bread?" "With the garlic bread," Mia confirmed, placing a steaming plate in front of him. As they sat together, eating dinner, talking about their days, making plans for the weekend, Mia thought about that rainy February night when a desperate child had knocked on a kitchen door. She thought about the choice she'd made, the risk she'd taken, the lies she'd told. She'd do it all again in a heartbeat. Because this family that had formed from crisis and compassion, this healing that was happening in real time, this child who finally believed he mattered, this was worth every risk, every consequence, every moment of fear. Oliver had promised to make her rich someday, and in every way that actually mattered, he'd kept that promise. Because Mia had learned something essential in these past 3 months. True wealth wasn't measured in money or possessions. It was measured in purpose, in connection, in the knowledge that you'd made a difference in someone's life, that you'd been seen and valued for who you truly were. And by that measure, Mia was the richest person in the world. "Mia?" Oliver said suddenly, breaking into her thoughts. "What are you thinking about?" She smiled at him, at this beautiful child who'd changed her entire life with one desperate knock on a door. "I'm thinking about how lucky I am," she said honestly. "How grateful I am that I opened that door." "Me too," Oliver said, reaching across the table to squeeze her hand. "Me too." And in that moment, in that warm kitchen filled with food and laughter and love, Mia knew that every promise had been kept. Every risk had been worth it. Every choice had led them exactly where they needed to be, together. If this story touched your heart, you're not alone. Every day, children feel invisible, overlooked by the adults who should notice them, struggling in silence, believing they don't matter. And every day, ordinary people have the power to change that with one simple choice: to see, to care, to help. This channel is dedicated to stories that remind us of our shared humanity, tales of compassion, transformation, and the incredible power of choosing kindness when no one's watching. Subscribe now and join a community that believes in the power of goodness. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a story that could change how you see the world and maybe inspire you to be someone's Mia, someone's reason to keep hoping. Comment below. Have you ever been someone's Mia? Has someone been yours? Share your story. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. Like this video if you believe that kindness matters, that people matter, and that sometimes the smallest actions create the biggest miracles. Share this story with someone who needs to be reminded that they matter, that they're seen, that their compassion makes a difference. Because here's the truth: you have the power to change someone's life today. You have the power to be the person who opens the door, who offers the meal, who sees the invisible child or adult right in front of you. The question is, will you? Welcome to a channel where stories don't just entertain, they inspire action. Welcome home. We're glad you're here. New stories every day. Your next favorite story starts now.